The starship Eclipse drifted silently through the cold, endless expanse of space. Its surface was scarred with burn marks and dents from countless battles, a testament to the hardships it had endured. Inside, the dimly lit corridors hummed faintly with the sounds of machinery working tirelessly to keep the ship operational. The crew moved about their duties, some checking instruments, others repairing damaged sections of the hull. But above all, there was an air of tension that no one could ignore. Captain Ryan Dalton stood at the center of the bridge, his tall frame outlined by the faint glow of monitors and control panels around him. His face was sharp, his jaw clenched as if bracing for something he couldn't yet see. He wore a dark uniform, simple and functional, with patches showing signs of wear. His hands rested on the railing in front of him, gripping it tightly as his eyes scanned the displays before him. Beside him stood Lieutenant Clara Hayes, her blonde hair tied back neatly, her expression calm but focused as she worked the main console. The Eclipse had just emerged from hyperspace, a risky maneuver that always left the ship vulnerable for a few moments while systems recalibrated. They were now in uncharted territory, far beyond the reaches of human exploration. This area of space was known only by rumors among spacers. Some called it the Veil, a place where strange signals had been detected, but no one dared venture too close. It wasn't marked on any official maps, and those who claimed to have seen it often returned with wild tales or not at all. Ryan turned slightly toward Clara, his voice low but steady. "Status report," he said, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. Clara glanced up briefly before returning her attention to the screen in front of her. Her fingers danced over the controls, pulling data from various sensors scattered across the ship. After a moment, she spoke. "We're deep in hostile territory, Captain. Long-range scans show multiple alien ships converging on our position. Looks like we've been spotted." Ryan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared ahead, his mind racing. He had expected trouble when they decided to enter this region, but he hadn't anticipated being found so quickly. Still, panic wasn't an option. Not now, not ever. "How many?" he asked finally, his voice calm despite the situation. "At least 6 vessels," Clara replied, her brow furrowing as more information came in. "They're moving fast. If they maintain their current speed, they'll be within firing range in under 10 minutes? Ryan nodded slowly, absorbing the information. 6 ships against 1, an overwhelming disadvantage even for someone as experienced as him. But retreat wasn't part of his vocabulary, not anymore. He straightened up, releasing his grip on the railing. "Raise shields and arm weapons, helm, prepare evasive maneuvers. We're not going down without putting up a fight." As orders were relayed throughout the ship, the atmosphere on the bridge shifted. Tension gave way to purpose, each crew member snapping into action. Engineers scrambled to reinforce the already weakened shields, while gunners readied the pulse cannons, mounted along the sides of the Eclipse. Even the youngest members of the crew, fresh-faced recruits who had never seen real combat, seemed to rise to the occasion. Fear lingered in their eyes, but determination burned brighter. A sudden jolt rocked the ship, throwing everyone off balance. Alarms blared loudly as red warning lights flashed across the bridge. Outside, streaks of energy zipped past the windows, narrowly missing the hull. The aliens had opened fire, shields holding for now, Clara announced, her voice strained. As she monitored the damage reports, she tapped rapidly at her console, rerouting power to critical systems. "But we can't take much more of this." Ryan gritted his teeth, his gaze fixed on the viewport. Through the thick glass, he could see the sleek shapes of alien ships closing in. Their designs were unlike anything he'd encountered before. Smooth, organic curves blended seamlessly with metallic surfaces, giving them an almost insect-like appearance. Each vessel glowed faintly, pulsating with an eerie light. That made them look alive rather than mechanical. "They want to play rough?" Ryan muttered under his breath, a hint of a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Turning to Clara, he added, "Patch me through to their lead ship. Let's see what kind of cowards hide behind numbers." Clara hesitated for a fraction of a second, unsure if provoking the enemy was wise, but she knew better than to question her captain. With a few quick keystrokes, she established a communication link. A distorted voice crackled over the speakers, deep and guttural, layered with strange harmonics that sent shivers down the spine of anyone listening. "This is Commander Vrax of the Krill Dominion," the voice growled, dripping with menace. "You are trespassing in sacred territory. Surrender your vessel or face annihilation." Ryan leaned forward slightly, resting both hands on the console in front of him. For a moment, he simply stared at the viewport, letting the words sink in. Then, without missing a beat, he responded. His voice carried a mix of sarcasm and defiance, perfectly calculated to unnerve his opponent. "Sacred territory? I didn't see any signs saying do not enter." Pausing for effect, he continued. "And surrender? To whom exactly?" "You?" There was a brief silence on the other end, followed by a burst of static. When Commander Vrax spoke again, his tone was colder, angrier. "You dare mock us, human? Your arrogance will cost you dearly." Ryan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Arrogance? No, Commander, what you're hearing is confidence. Something you clearly lack if you think sending 6 ships after one little freighter scares me." Leaning closer to the microphone, he added, "Tell your fleet to stand down, or I'll make sure every last one of them regrets crossing paths with the Eclipse." Before Vrax could reply, the alien fleet unleashed another wave of attacks. Energy blasts slammed into the Eclipse's shields, causing the entire ship to shudder violently. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and several consoles shorted out entirely. On the bridge, crew members shouted warnings and status updates. Trying to keep everything under control amidst the chaos, Ryan remained unfazed, his focus unwavering. "Clara," he barked, turning to his lieutenant. "Prepare the pulse cannons. Helm, bring us around for a strafing run." "We're not sitting ducks, they'll learn that soon enough." Clara nodded sharply, her fingers flying over the controls, as she coordinated with the gunnery teams. Meanwhile, the helmsman adjusted the ship's trajectory, angling it toward the nearest alien vessel. The Eclipse might have been outnumbered, but its smaller size and superior maneuverability gave it a fighting chance. Outside, the battle intensified. Plasma bolts streaked past the windows, illuminating the darkness with flashes of brilliant light. Explosions erupted in the distance as stray shots collided with debris floating nearby. Through it all, the Eclipse weaved gracefully between its attackers, dodging incoming fire while lining up counterattacks of its own. Finally, the moment came. "Pulse cannons ready," Clara called out, her voice rising above the din. Ryan wasted no time. "Fire!" With a deafening roar, the Eclipse unleashed a torrent of energy blasts. The concentrated firepower struck one of the alien ships dead center, tearing through its defenses and crippling its engines. The vessel veered wildly off course, trailing smoke and flames before disappearing into the void. The bridge erupted in cheers, but Ryan silenced them with a raised hand. "Don't celebrate yet," he warned. "We're not done here." Despite scoring a direct hit, the remaining Krill ships showed no signs of backing down. In fact, they seemed to grow more aggressive, coordinating their movements to surround the Eclipse. Trapped in the middle, the human crew faced a grim reality. Survival depended on their ability to outthink and outmaneuver an enemy that vastly outnumbered them. Ryan's mind raced as he considered their options. Retreat was impossible. Their engines wouldn't hold up under sustained pursuit. Fighting head-on was equally suicidal. That left only one choice: use the environment to their advantage. "Clara," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the noise, "are there any nearby obstacles? Asteroids, debris fields, anything?" Clara frowned, scanning the sensor. "Readings. There's a derelict station about 2 clicks away. Old, abandoned, looks like it hasn't been used in decades." Ryan's lips curled into a predatory grin. "Perfect. Set a course for the station. Full throttle." As the Eclipse sped toward the derelict structure, the Krill ships pursued relentlessly, their weapons blazing. Inside the battered starship, the crew held on tight, praying that their captain's gamble would pay off. For now, all they could do was trust in Ryan Dalton and hope that his legendary reputation wasn't just a myth. The Eclipse hurtled through space, its engines roaring at full throttle as it raced toward the derelict station. Behind them, the Krill ships gave chase, their sleek forms slicing through the void like predators stalking prey. Energy blasts streaked past the windows, narrowly missing the fragile hull of the human vessel. Each impact sent violent tremors rippling through the ship, threatening to tear it apart. On the bridge, Captain Ryan Dalton stood firm, his hands gripping the railing. In front of him as he stared ahead at the looming structure. The station was ancient, its once shining surface now pockmarked with craters and scorch marks from battles long forgotten. Strange symbols were etched into its metallic exterior, glowing faintly in the dim light of distant stars. It looked like a tomb floating silently in the endless blackness of space. "Hold steady," Ryan commanded, his voice calm but carrying an edge of urgency. "We're almost there." Lieutenant Clara Hayes glanced up from her console, her face pale but resolute. "Shields are down to 30%, Captain. If we take another direct hit, we won't," Ryan interrupted firmly, cutting her off before she could finish. He turned slightly, meeting her gaze with unwavering confidence. "Just keep us on course. We'll lose them inside." Clara nodded and returned her focus to her controls, adjusting the ship's trajectory with precise movements. The rest of the crew worked tirelessly, each member doing their part to keep the Eclipse operational despite the chaos unfolding around them. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits and smoke filled the air, but no one faltered. They trusted Ryan implicitly. Even if the odds seemed insurmountable. As they approached the station, the Krill ships intensified their assault. Plasma bolts hammered the Eclipse's weakened shields, causing the entire ship to shudder violently. Alarms blared loudly, warning of critical failures in multiple systems. Still, Ryan refused to back down. His eyes remained fixed on the station, calculating every possible move. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," he ordered sharply. "Helm, swing us wide and bring us in low. Let's see how well those oversized bugs can handle tight spaces." The helmsman acknowledged the order with a quick nod and adjusted the controls accordingly. The Eclipse veered sharply to the left, skimming dangerously close to the station's jagged surface. The sudden change in direction caught the Krill off guard, forcing them to break formation to avoid colliding with the debris surrounding the structure. Several alien vessels clipped smaller asteroids, sending chunks of rock spinning wildly into space. Ryan allowed himself a brief smile. "That's it, keep them guessing." Inside the station, however, things were far from safe. As the Eclipse passed through the outer defenses, the crew found themselves surrounded by eerie silence. The only sounds came from the creaking metal of the damaged ship and the faint hum of failing systems. The interior of the station was dark and foreboding, illuminated only by the weak emergency lights scattered across the walls. Dust floated lazily in the air. Disturbed by the ship's arrival, Ryan led a small team deeper into the structure, leaving Clara in charge of the bridge. With him were Sergeant Jake Owens, a burly man with a perpetual scowl, and Ensign Maria Lopez, a young engineer who had proven herself resourceful time and again. Armed with pulse rifles and flashlights, they moved cautiously through the narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing ominously in the oppressive quiet this place gives. "Me the creeps," Maria whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her own breathing. She shone her flashlight along the walls, revealing strange carvings that seemed to shift and writhe under the light. "What kind of civilization built this?" "No idea," Ryan replied tersely, his rifle raised as he scanned the shadows ahead. "But whatever it was, it's long gone now. Focus on finding something useful, weapons, power cells, anything that can help us hold off the Krill." Jake grunted in agreement, his eyes darting suspiciously at every corner they passed. "If you ask me, this whole thing feels like a trap. Why would they let us just waltz in here?" "They didn't let us do anything," Ryan shot back, his tone sharp. "We made our own choice. Now we deal with the consequences." They pressed onward, navigating the labyrinthine passages of the station. Along the way, they encountered remnants of technology far beyond anything humanity had. Developed panels covered in alien script, devices pulsating with unknown energy, and doorways sealed shut by mechanisms they couldn't begin to understand. Despite the wealth of potential resources, Nothing appeared functional enough to aid their situation. Finally, after what felt like hours, they stumbled upon a large chamber near the heart of the station. The room was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow high above. In the center stood a massive machine, its design both intricate and grotesque. Tubes and wires snaked out from its core, connecting it to various consoles arranged in a circular pattern around the perimeter. At the heart of the device lay a grotesque creature, its body fused to the machinery in ways that defied comprehension. Its flesh was translucent, revealing pulsating organs beneath the surface. Eyes that glowed faintly opened and closed in irregular intervals as if it were dreaming or dying. "What is that?" Maria asked, her voice trembling as she stepped back instinctively. Ryan frowned, lowering his rifle slightly as he studied the scene before him. "I don't know," he admitted, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced of his own words. "But I'm guessing it's not friendly." Before anyone could respond, the creature stirred. Its eyes snapped open fully, glowing brighter than before. A piercing shriek echoed through the chamber, reverberating painfully in their ears. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and the walls groaned as if the entire station were coming alive. "Back to the ship!" Ryan shouted, turning on his heel and sprinting toward the exit. The others followed without hesitation, their hearts pounding as adrenaline surged through their veins. Behind them, the creature continued to scream, its voice growing louder and more distorted with each passing second. Lights flickered erratically throughout the station, casting shifting shadows that danced menacingly along the walls. Doors slammed shut automatically, sealing off sections of the corridor and forcing the group to double back repeatedly. It was as if the station itself were trying to trap them. When they finally reached the docking bay where the Eclipse awaited, they found the Krill already there. Dozens of alien soldiers poured out of their ships, their weapons trained on the humans. Their armor gleamed menacingly in the dim light, and their insect-like faces betrayed no emotion, not fear, not anger, nothing. Ryan skidded to a halt, raising his rifle defensively. His team formed a loose semicircle behind him, their weapons aimed at the advancing aliens. For a moment, everything froze, the humans and the Krill locked in a tense standoff. Then, one of the Krill stepped forward, towering over the others. His armor was adorned with jagged spikes and glowing runes, marking him as someone of importance. Ryan recognized him immediately. It was Commander Vrax, the same being who had issued the ultimatum earlier. "You have meddled with forces beyond your understanding, human," Vrax growled, his voice layered with unnatural harmonics. "Your insolence will be your undoing." Ryan smirked, though there was no humor in it. Instead, it carried a dangerous edge, a promise of defiance even in the face of overwhelming odds. "Meddling? That's rich coming from someone who thinks blowing up random ships counts as diplomacy." Vrax tilted his head slightly, studying Ryan with cold, calculating eyes. "You misunderstand. This station belongs to the Dominion. It is sacred ground, and you have desecrated it. For that, you must die." Ryan shrugged casually, as if discussing the weather rather than imminent death. "Sacred ground? Hate to break it to you, pal, but nobody put up a sign. Besides, last I checked, sacred grounds don't come with creepy monsters attached." The comment earned a collective hiss from the Krill soldiers, their bodies tensing as if preparing to strike. But Vrax raised a hand, silencing them with a single gesture. "Enough, your mockery proves your ignorance. Perhaps witnessing the truth will enlighten you." With that, Vrax gestured toward the entrance of the docking bay. From the shadows emerged the grotesque creature they had seen earlier, dragged forcibly by unseen forces. Its screams grew louder, more frantic, as it thrashed against the restraints binding it to the machinery. The sight sent chills down everyone's spines, including Ryan's. "What the hell is that thing?" Jake muttered under his breath, his grip tightening on his rifle. Ryan didn't answer. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of information. The station, the symbols, the creature, they all pointed to something ancient, powerful, and deeply dangerous. And now, it seemed, the Krill intended to use it against them. Well, Ryan said finally, breaking the silence with a dry chuckle. Looks like we've got ourselves a real party. The tension in the room thickened, electric with anticipation. Both sides knew the next move would determine the outcome not just for the humans aboard the Eclipse, but perhaps for the fate of the galaxy itself. The docking bay was a powder keg waiting to explode. The Krill soldiers stood in perfect formation, their weapons aimed unwaveringly at the small group of humans. Commander Vrax loomed at the center, his towering figure exuding authority and menace. Behind him, the grotesque creature writhed and screamed, its body straining against the restraints that bound it to the machinery. Its glowing eyes darted wildly. As if searching for an escape or a target, Ryan Dalton's mind raced, analyzing the situation with cold precision. He had faced overwhelming odds before, but this was different. The Krill weren't just trying to kill them, they were using the station and its horrifying occupant as tools of intimidation. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't natural. It radiated danger, a living weapon tethered to the alien technology surrounding it. And judging by the way the Krill treated it, they intended to unleash it. "Captain?" Sergeant Jake Owens whispered, urgently, his voice barely audible over the creature's shrieks. "We're outnumbered. If we don't act now, we're dead." Ryan didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on Vrax, studying every subtle movement, every flicker of emotion or lack thereof on the alien commander's face. Finally, he spoke, his tone calm but laced with steel. "Not yet. Hold your fire." Jake clenched his jaw but obeyed, lowering his rifle slightly without taking his finger off the trigger. Beside him, Ensign Maria Lopez shifted nervously, her flashlight beam trembling as it swept across the walls. She glanced back at the entrance they had come through, silently calculating how long it would take to retreat. But Ryan knew there was no going back. The Krill had sealed off their escape routes, leaving them trapped between the aliens and the monstrous entity behind them. Vrax took a step forward, his armored boots clanking against the metal floor. "Your defiance amuses me, human," he growled, his voice layered with unnatural harmonics that made it hard to focus. "But amusement has its limits. Surrender now or witness the consequences of your arrogance." Ryan smirked, though there was no humor in it. Instead, his expression carried a challenge, a silent dare for Vrax to make good on his threat. "Surrender? To you?" He laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "You must be joking. I've seen scarier things than you and your bug army." The comment earned another collective hiss from the Krill soldiers, their bodies tensing like coiled springs. Vrax raised a hand again, silencing them with a single gesture. "You misunderstand, Captain Dalton. This is not about you. It is about what comes next." He gestured toward the creature, which let out another ear-splitting scream. "Behold the Harbinger, a relic of ancient power, a being forged to cleanse worlds. You have awakened it, and now it will consume all who stand in its path." Ryan frowned, his smirk fading as he processed Vrax's words. Ancient power. Cleansing. Worlds. It sounded like the stuff of legends, but given the circumstances, he wasn't willing to dismiss it outright. Still, fear wasn't an option, not here, not now. "If it's so powerful," he said, his voice steady despite the unease, creeping into his gut, "why haven't you used it already? Why drag us into this?" Vrax tilted his head slightly as if considering the question. "Because the Harbinger requires a catalyst, a spark, to ignite its full potential. Your presence here, your interference, has provided that spark. Now, it grows restless. Soon it will break free, and when it does—" He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Ryan's grip tightened on his rifle. He didn't fully understand what Vrax was talking about, but one thing was clear: the longer they stayed, the worse their chances became. Whatever the Harbinger was, it wasn't something they could fight head-on, not with the resources they had left. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. "Maria," Ryan said quietly, his eyes never leaving Vrax, "can you disable those restraints holding the creature? Maybe buy us some time?" Maria hesitated, glancing at the tangled mess of wires and tubes connecting the Harbinger to the machine. I think so," she stammered, "but it'll take a few minutes. And if I mess up, You won't mess up? Ryan interrupted firmly. Just do it. Maria nodded and quickly moved toward the console nearest the creature, her hands trembling as she began working. Jake stepped closer to Ryan, forming a protective barrier between him and the krill. What's the plan, Captain? He asked under his breath. Ryan's eyes darted around the room, assessing their options. The krill were spread out, covering every possible angle of attack. Their numbers alone made direct confrontation suicidal. But if they could create enough chaos, maybe, just maybe, they could slip away. When Maria finishes, we cause a distraction, he whispered. Make them focus on us while she works. Once the creature breaks loose, we run like hell. Jake nodded grimly, understanding the risks. And if it turns on us instead? Then we improvise, Ryan replied simply. There was no time for elaborate strategies, no margin for error. Survival depended on speed, surprise, and sheer determination. As Maria worked frantically at the console, the tension in the room grew palpable. The Harbinger's screams intensified, growing louder and more frenzied. Sparks flew from the machinery as circuits overloaded, and the lights flickered erratically, casting shifting shadows across the walls. The krill shifted uneasily, their weapons wavering slightly as they glanced nervously at the creature. Finally, Maria gave a small nod. Done, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The restraints are disabled. It's only a matter of time before it breaks free. Ryan nodded once, signaling Jake to prepare. Then, without warning, he fired a burst from his rifle directly at the ceiling above the krill. The shot struck true, sending chunks of debris raining down on the aliens. Chaos erupted instantly as the krill scrambled to avoid the falling rubble, their disciplined formation breaking apart. Now! Ryan shouted, turning and sprinting toward the nearest exit. Jake and Maria followed close behind, their footsteps echoing loudly in the confined space. Behind them, the Harbinger let out a final, deafening roar as it tore itself free from the machine. Its restraints snapped like twigs and it lunged forward. Its translucent body shimmering with unnatural energy, the krill turned their attention to the creature, firing wildly in an attempt to subdue it. But their weapons seemed to have little effect. The Harbinger moved with terrifying speed, swatting aside soldiers like insects. Its glowing eyes locked onto Vrax, who raised his arms defensively as if trying to shield himself. Ryan and his team didn't stop to watch. They pushed forward, navigating the labyrinthine corridors of the station as alarms blared and explosions rocked the structure. The entire place felt alive, groaning and creaking as if protesting their presence. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe, but they pressed on, driven by sheer desperation. When they finally reached the eclipse, Clara Hayes was waiting for them, her face pale with worry. What happened? She demanded, helping Maria aboard. Where are the krill? No time to explain, Ryan barked, rushing to the helm. Get us out of here now. Clara nodded and immediately began powering up the engines. Outside, the station was collapsing in on itself, consumed by the Harbinger's rampage. Alien ships exploded in fiery bursts as the creature tore through them with relentless fury. Through the viewport, Ryan watched as Vrax's flagship attempted to flee, only to be engulfed by the chaos. Shields up, Ryan ordered. Full throttle. Let's put as much distance between us and that thing as possible. The Eclipse surged forward, its battered hull groaning under the strain. Behind them, the station imploded, swallowed by a swirling vortex of energy that pulsed with an otherworldly light. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire sector of space would be consumed. But then the vortex collapsed inward, leaving only silence and drifting debris. On the bridge, the crew sat in stunned silence, their hearts still racing from the ordeal. Ryan leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly as the adrenaline began to fade. They had survived, but at what cost? The Harbinger was loose, a force of destruction unleashed upon the galaxy. And somewhere out there, Commander Vrax and the remnants of the Krill fleet likely plotted their revenge. Clara broke the silence first, her voice soft but tinged with awe. What was that thing? Ryan shook his head, his expression grim. I don't know. But whatever it was, it's not done with us yet. For now, though, they were safe. The Eclipse limped through space, its crew battered but alive. As the stars stretched endlessly before them, Ryan allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. Out here, in the vast unknown, there were always new dangers lurking in the shadows. But as long as he drew breath, he would face them head-on. Because that's what captains did. That's what survivors did. The Eclipse drifted through the void of space, its engines sputtering weakly as it limped away from the wreckage of the station. The crew moved about the ship in silence, their faces pale and drawn from exhaustion. No one spoke much there. Wasn't much to say. They had survived, but the cost weighed heavily on all of them. The memory of the Harbinger's scream still echoed in their minds, a haunting reminder of how close they had come to annihilation. Captain Ryan Dalton stood at the helm, his hands gripping the railing in front of him as he stared out into the endless expanse of stars. His uniform was torn and singed, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. He hadn't slept since the battle, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. But despite his fatigue, his gaze remained sharp, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. The krill might have been scattered, but Ryan knew better than to assume they were safe. Lieutenant Clara Hayes approached quietly, her steps soft against the metal floor. She carried a datapad in one hand, her expression unreadable. "Captain," she said softly, hesitating before continuing, "we've patched up the worst of the damage, but the engines are barely holding together. We can't keep running like this." Ryan didn't turn to look at her. Instead, he nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "How long until we're operational again?" Clara hesitated, glancing down at the datapad. "At least 12 hours. Maybe more if we want to make sure everything's stable." Ryan sighed deeply, rubbing the back of his neck. 12 hours meant they were sitting ducks out here, vulnerable to any enemy that might stumble upon them. But they didn't have a choice. Pushing the ship further would risk catastrophic failure, and losing the Eclipse meant losing everything. "Do what you can," he said finally, his voice firm but weary. "And keep an eye on long-range scanners. If anything shows up, I want to know immediately." Clara nodded and turned to leave, but something stopped her. She paused, looking back at Ryan with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "What was that thing back there, that Harbinger?" Ryan shook his head, his grip tightening on the railing. "I don't know," he admitted, his tone quiet but carrying an edge of frustration. "But whatever it wasn't natural. It felt wrong. Like it didn't belong here." Clara frowned, her brow furrowing as she processed his words. "You think the krill created it?" "I don't think so," Ryan replied after a moment. "They were scared of it too. Whatever that thing is, it predates them. And now it's loose." The weight of that realization hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. The Harbinger wasn't just a weapon, it was a force of destruction, unleashed by their interference. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they had made a grave mistake. By entering the station, they had awakened something ancient and unknowable. And now it was out there, somewhere, spreading chaos across the galaxy. Meanwhile, deeper within, the ship, Sergeant Jake Owens and Ensign Maria Lopez worked tirelessly to repair critical systems. The engineering bay was a mess of wires, tools, and half-finished projects, the air thick with the smell of burnt circuits and oil. Sparks flew as Jake welded a crack in the hull while Maria pored over a console, rerouting power to stabilize. "The ship's failing life support. You think we're really safe?" Maria asked suddenly, her voice trembling slightly. She glanced over her shoulder at Jake, her wide eyes betraying her fear. "What if that thing comes after us?" Jake set down his welding tool and wiped his hands on a rag before turning to face her. His expression was grim, but there was a hint of reassurance in his voice. "We're alive, kid. That's what matters right now. As long as we keep moving, we've got a chance." Maria bit her lip, clearly unconvinced. "But what if it's not enough? What if it finds us no matter where we go?" Jake sighed, leaning back against the wall. For a moment he looked older. Then his years, the lines on his face deepened by worry. "Look, I'm not gonna lie to you. Out here there's always something bigger, scarier, meaner waiting around the corner. But that's why we stick together. That's why we fight. Because giving up isn't an option. Maria nodded slowly, though her hands still trembled as she returned to her work. Jake watched her for a moment longer before picking up his tools again. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for certain. Fear wouldn't save them, only action would. Back on the bridge, Ryan continued to stare out into space, lost in thought. The events of the past few hours replayed in his mind, each detail sharper and more vivid than the last. He couldn't shake the image of the Harbinger breaking free, its glowing eyes filled with rage and hunger. Nor could he forget the look on Vrax's face, a mixture of arrogance and desperation. As the Krill commander realized he had lost control of the situation, Ryan clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. He hated being manipulated, hated feeling powerless. But more than anything, he hated leaving questions unanswered. Who or what had created the Harbinger? Why had the Krill been guarding it? And most importantly, what did it want? As if summoned by his thoughts, the ship's alarms blared suddenly, jolting everyone into action. Clara rushed to her console, her fingers flying over the controls as she analyzed the incoming data. "Captain," she called out urgently, "we've got movement on the scanners. Multiple contacts closing in fast." Ryan straightened instantly, his fatigue forgotten as adrenaline surged through his veins. "Krill?" Clara shook her head, her expression grim. "Unknown. But they're bigger than anything we've seen before?" Ryan's heart sank. This wasn't good. If the Krill had regrouped, they might stand a chance against them. But unknown ships meant unknown threats, and given their current state, they were in no position to fight. "Raise shields," he ordered sharply, his voice cutting through the tension. "Helm, prepare evasive maneuvers. Clara, keep me updated on their positions." The crew sprang into action, each member focusing on their task with laser-like precision. The Eclipse shuddered violently as the first wave of energy blasts slammed into its weakened shields. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and warning lights flashed across the bridge. Despite their efforts, the ship groaned under the strain. Its systems pushed to the brink of failure. Ryan clenched his teeth, his mind racing as he tried to formulate a plan. Running wasn't an option. Their engines wouldn't hold up under sustained pursuit. Fighting was equally suicidal. They were outnumbered and outgunned. That left only one choice. Deception. "Clara," he said suddenly, turning to his lieutenant, "can we fake a reactor overload? Make it look like we're about to blow?" Clara blinked in surprise, caught off guard by the question. "It's risky," she admitted after a moment. "If we miscalculate, we could actually blow ourselves up." "We don't have time to debate," Ryan snapped, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Do it." Clara nodded and quickly began inputting commands into her console. Outside, the alien ships continued their relentless assault, their weapons blazing as they closed in for the kill. The Eclipse rocked violently with each impact, sending crew members stumbling across the bridge. Finally, Clara gave a small nod. "Reactor overload sequence initiated. 30 seconds until detonation." Ryan turned to the communications officer. "Broadcast a distress signal, let them know we're going down. Make it convincing." The officer nodded and complied, sending out a garbled transmission that mimicked the sound of failing systems. Through the viewport, Ryan watched as the alien ships hesitated, their movements slowing as they assessed the situation. For a moment, it seemed like the ruse might fail, but then, one by one, the ships began to pull back. Retreating into the darkness of space, Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Shut it down," he ordered, his voice tinged with relief. "And get us out of here." Clara quickly canceled the overload sequence, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The Eclipse lurched forward, its engines straining as it fled the scene. Behind them, the alien ships disappeared into the void, leaving only silence in their wake. Hours later, the crew gathered in the mess hall, exhausted but alive. The tension had eased somewhat, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. They had survived another day, and for now, that was enough. Ryan sat alone at a table in the corner, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. He didn't join the others in their muted celebrations. Instead, he stared into the liquid, his mind replaying the events of the day. The Harbinger, the Krill, the mysterious ships, all of it pointed to a larger conspiracy, a web of secrets spanning the galaxy he didn't have all the answers yet, but he would find them. Because that's what captains did. That's what survivors did. The Eclipse drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space, its battered hull groaning with every movement. The repairs had been rushed and imperfect, but they were enough to keep the ship operational, at least for now. Inside, the crew moved about their duties with quiet efficiency, though the tension in the air was palpable. Everyone knew that survival was fragile, a delicate balance between hope and disaster. Captain Ryan Dalton sat alone in his quarters, staring at the wall without really seeing it. His mind replayed the events of the past few days like a broken recording: the Krill ships, the derelict station, the Harbinger's terrifying awakening, and the mysterious fleet that had nearly destroyed them. Each memory brought new questions, none of which had answers. What was the Harbinger? Who built it? And why did the Krill guard something so dangerous? Ryan clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath his calm exterior. He hated not knowing. Out here, in the uncharted reaches of space, ignorance could mean death. But there was no time to dwell on it. They needed to find a safe haven somewhere to regroup, repair, and prepare for whatever came next on the bridge. Lieutenant Clara Hayes worked tirelessly at her console, monitoring long-range scanners for any sign of pursuit. She glanced up occasionally at the viewport, where the stars stretched endlessly before them. Her thoughts mirrored Ryan's uncertainty. They had escaped the immediate threat, but how long would their luck hold? The galaxy felt vast and indifferent, yet somehow alive with unseen dangers lurking just beyond the horizon. Anything new? Ryan asked as he entered the bridge, his voice low but carrying authority. Clara shook her head, her expression grim. Nothing yet, but that doesn't mean we're clear. Whatever those ships were, they weren't ordinary raiders. Ryan nodded slowly, leaning against the railing beside her. Do you think they'll come after us? It's possible, Clara admitted. But if they do, we won't last long, not in this condition. Ryan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Then we need a plan. A place to hide, somewhere remote enough to throw them off our trail? Clara hesitated, glancing down at her datapad. There's a small outpost listed in the archives. It's old, abandoned, or at least it was supposed to be. If we can reach it, we might be able to fortify it. Ryan considered this for a moment before nodding decisively. Set a course. Let's see what kind of ghosts are waiting for us there. Hours later, the Eclipse approached the coordinates Clara had provided. The outpost was little more than a crumbling structure floating amidst a field of asteroids. Its metal walls were corroded with age, and parts of it had collapsed entirely, leaving gaping holes that exposed the interior to the vacuum of space. Still, it offered shelter, and that was enough. As the crew docked the ship and began securing the area, Ryan led a small team inside to assess the situation. Sergeant Jake Owens and Ensign Maria Lopez accompanied him, their weapons drawn as they cautiously explored the dark corridors. Dust coated every surface and the air smelled stale, but signs of recent activity were evident: scorch marks on the walls, discarded supplies scattered across the floor. This place isn't as abandoned as we thought, Jake muttered, kicking aside an empty ration pack. Ryan frowned, scanning the shadows ahead. Someone's been using this place as a hideout. We need to find out who and whether they're friendly. They pressed onward, navigating the labyrinthine passages until they reached what appeared to be a central chamber. The room was dimly lit by flickering emergency lights, revealing makeshift barricades and crude defenses. In the center stood a man, tall and wiry, with unkempt hair and a scruffy beard. He raised his hands slowly as Ryan's team aimed their weapons at him. "Who are you?" Ryan demanded, his tone sharp and commanding. The man smirked, lowering his hands slightly. "Relax, Captain. I'm not your enemy." Ryan didn't lower his rifle. That remains to be seen. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" "My name's Victor Kane," the man replied, his voice calm despite the weapons pointed at him. I used to work salvage until things got complicated. Now I stay hidden, picking up scraps and staying out of trouble. And the krill? Ryan pressed. Have you seen them around here? Victor's smirk faded, replaced by a look of genuine concern. Yeah, I've seen them. They're searching for something, or someone. Whatever it is, it's big, dangerous. Ryan exchanged a glance with Jake and Maria. This confirmed their suspicions. The krill weren't done hunting. But what exactly were they looking for? The Harbinger, or something else entirely? We need to use this place as a base, Ryan said finally, turning back to Victor. Are you willing to help us? Victor shrugged, feigning nonchalance. Depends. What's in it for me? Ryan stepped closer, his gaze piercing. Your life, work with us, and maybe we all survive. Cross us and you're on your own. Victor held his stare for a moment before nodding reluctantly. All right, Captain, you've got yourself a deal. Over the next several hours, the crew worked alongside Victor to fortify the outpost. Barricades were reinforced, traps were set, and sensors were installed to monitor the surrounding area. Despite the urgency of their task, a sense of camaraderie began to form among the group. Even Victor proved useful, sharing knowledge of the region and offering tips on surviving in such hostile territory. Meanwhile, Ryan and Clara pored over maps and data, trying to piece together the bigger picture. The krill's movements suggested they were following a pattern, converging on specific locations throughout the sector. It wasn't random, they were searching for something. What do you think they're after? Clara asked, breaking the silence. Ryan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Whatever it is, it's connected to the Harbinger. That thing wasn't just a weapon, it was a key to what? I don't know. But the krill want it, and they'll stop at nothing to get it. Clara frowned, her brow furrowing as she processed. His words, if they succeed, what happens then? Ryan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the map spread out before them, his mind racing with possibilities. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with determination. We stop them, no matter what it takes. As days passed and the crew settled into a routine, supplies were rationed, repairs continued, and patrols were organized to ensure the outpost remained secure. Morale improved slightly, though the shadow of danger loomed ever-present. Then, one evening, the alarms blared suddenly, jolting everyone into action. On the bridge, Clara monitored the scanners, her expression tense. Multiple contacts inbound. She reported urgently, krill ships. Ryan cursed under his breath, grabbing his rifle as he rushed to join the others. How many? 6, Clara replied, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. Same as before. Ryan clenched his jaw, his mind working quickly. 6 ships against their fortified position, it wasn't ideal, but it was better than facing them in open space. Arm yourselves, he ordered sharply. We hold this ground. The crew scrambled to their positions, taking cover behind barricades and preparing for battle. Outside, the krill ships descended upon the outpost, their sleek forms illuminated by flashes of energy as they opened fire. Explosions rocked the structure, sending debris flying and shaking the very foundations of the outpost. Ryan led the defense, directing his team with precision and calmness that inspired confidence. Pulse rifles fired in controlled bursts, targeting weak points on the enemy vessels. Traps laid by Victor triggered unexpectedly, causing chaos among the krill forces. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might actually win, but then, Commander, Vrax appeared once again, leading a squad of heavily armored soldiers onto the battlefield. His presence sent a chill through the crew, a reminder of the overwhelming odds stacked against them. You cannot win, Vrax bellowed, his voice layered with unnatural harmonics. Surrender now or perish. Ryan stepped forward, raising his weapon defiantly. Surrender to who? To you? Not a chance. With a roar, the two sides clashed, exchanging fire in a desperate struggle for survival. The battle raged fiercely, neither side giving an inch. Sparks flew, smoke filled the air, and cries of pain echoed through the corridors. Finally, in a daring maneuver, Ryan managed to isolate Vrax from his troops. The two faced off in a brutal melee, trading blows with ferocity. Despite his injuries, Ryan fought with everything he had, driven by sheer willpower and determination. With a final, powerful strike, he decapitated Vrax. Ending the fight, breathing heavily, Ryan turned to face the remaining Krill forces. Grabbing Vrax's severed head, he strode boldly into view, hurling it onto the ground in front of them. "Surrender!" "To who?" he shouted, his voice echoing with defiance. For a moment there was silence. Then, slowly, the Krill lowered their weapons, retreating back to their ships. The battle was over for now. As the dust settled, Ryan allowed himself a small smile. They had won, but he knew this was only the beginning. Out here, in the vast unknown, there would always be new enemies and new battles to fight.